On the 1st of February, 1959, 9 experienced hikers cut their own tent open from the inside and ran out into a minus 30-degree night, wearing socks, some of them barely dressed at all. They ran toward the trees, away from something. Weeks later, search parties found the tent still standing, half buried in snow, food untouched inside. The 9 hikers were not inside it. What happened to them over the next several hours has never been fully explained. Not by the Soviet investigators who closed the case, not by the scientists who reopened it 60 years later, and not by anyone since. This is the Dyatlov Pass incident. Some of the injuries didn't make sense. One woman was missing her tongue. 2 of the group had chest fractures so severe, a Soviet pathologist compared the force required to a car crash. And yet neither of them had a single bruise on the outside of their body. They died on a remote slope in the Ural Mountains, with no one else around for miles. The official Soviet report blamed, in its own words, a compelling unknown force. 66 years later, nobody has proven them wrong. To understand what happened on that mountain, you first have to understand who these people were, because they were not amateurs. In January of 1959, a group of 10 students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute set out on a skiing expedition into the northern Urals, led by a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. This was not a casual hike. The route was rated Category 3, the most difficult grade on the Soviet system, crossing more than 300 kilometers of frozen wilderness in the dead of winter, with a final ascent of a mountain called Otorten. Every member of the group was an experienced skier and mountaineer. Several had already completed expeditions just as demanding. They knew the cold. They knew how to survive it. One member, Yuri Yudin, was forced to turn back early after the second day, when an old injury flared up and left him unable to continue. He said goodbye to his 9 friends at a small settlement called the Second Northern and skied back toward civilization alone. It was the last time he would ever see any of them alive. For the rest of his life, Yudin carried a particular kind of grief, the guilt of a man saved by his own body's weakness, while everyone he loved walked on into the snow without him. The remaining 9 pressed on. Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Ludmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Rustam Slobodin, Yuri Doroshenko, Yuri Krivonischenko, Nicholas Thibault Brignoles, and Semyon Zolotaryov, an older, more experienced outdoorsman who had joined the university group almost as an afterthought to gain enough certification hours for his own qualifications. None of them could have known that a mountain the local Mansi people called Kolit-Syakhl, which in their language translates to Dead Mountain, was waiting for them. We know what the final days looked like only because of what was left behind. A group diary passed between members and rolls of camera film, developed only after searchers found the bodies. The diary entries from the final days read like any group of friends on any expedition. Complaints about the cold, jokes about who snored the loudest, a small argument about the route. Nothing that reads, in hindsight, like the beginning of a horror story, which is in its own way the most unsettling detail of all. Whatever came for them gave no warning worth writing down. The last photographs are almost unbearable to look at now, precisely because they're so ordinary. Hikers laughing as they trudge through deep snow. Someone building a wall of snow blocks to shelter the tent from the wind. Dyatlov, smiling, adjusting a piece of equipment. The final frame on the roll, the very last image any of them ever took, shows nothing but a dim, blurred, almost formless shape against the dark. Some researchers believe it's simply a flash malfunction, an accidental exposure as the camera was packed away. Others have spent decades staring at that frame, certain it shows something else low against the horizon that no one has ever been able to explain. On the 1st of February, the group made a decision that still puzzles investigators to this day. Rather than descending into the shelter of the forest for the night, the safer, standard choice, and the one their own experience should have dictated, they made camp directly on the open slope of Koletsyakhl. Dyatlov's notes suggest they wanted to avoid losing the altitude they had fought to gain, planning to press on toward Otorten the next morning. It was a small, practical decision, the kind experienced hikers make all the time. It would turn out to be the last decision most of them ever made. The group was due back in the city of Sverdlovsk by the 12th of February. When days passed with no word, there was no immediate alarm. Delays were common on Category 3 routes, and nobody worried until the group failed to check in a full week later. On the 20th of February, search parties and eventually soldiers and volunteers were sent into the mountains. On the 26th of February, a search volunteer named Mikhail Ravine found their tent, and what he found made no sense at all. The tent was still standing, still half anchored against the wind, its silhouette barely visible under a layer of fresh snow. Inside, searchers found neatly folded winter coats, boots, food, and personal belongings, almost all of it still in place, as though the occupants had simply stepped outside for a moment. But the tent's canvas wall, facing down toward the forest, had been cut open, not torn by wind or weight of snow, but sliced in more than one place from inside. Outside the tent, in the fading evening light, searchers found footprints, 8 or 9 sets, some barefoot, most in socks or a single layer of thin clothing, in temperatures that would later be estimated at nearly minus 30 degrees Celsius. The prints led away from the tent, down the open slope, toward the tree lying more than a kilometer below. They did not wander. They did not hesitate. Whatever the 9 hikers were running from, they ran from it together in the same direction without stopping to dress for a Siberian winter night. Consider that for a moment. 9 trained mountaineers, people who understood better than almost anyone exactly what untreated exposure does to the human body in minus 30-degree cold, chose to run outside in socks rather than take the seconds needed to put on boots inside a tent that was, as far as we know, still structurally intact enough to survive the wind. Something on that mountain that night was apparently more dangerous, in their minds, than freezing to death. We still don't know what that something was. Following the footprints down through the snow, search teams reached the edge of the forest and found the first 2 bodies beneath a large cedar tree standing alone at the tree line. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonischenko lay near the base of the cedar, dressed only in their underwear, their bodies showing signs of severe hypothermia. Beneath the tree, searchers found the remains of a small fire, barely more than embers by the time it was found, built from branches that had clearly been broken off the cedar itself. And here is where the scene stops making sense in an ordinary way. The lower branches of that cedar were snapped and stripped away to a height of nearly 5 meters above the ground. Bark was scraped from the trunk, as if someone had climbed it repeatedly in bare or sock-covered feet in the dark and the cold, as if they were trying to see something in the distance, or escape something on the ground. Between the cedar and the tent, searchers found 3 more bodies scattered across the open slope at different distances, in postures that suggested they had died while trying to make their way back uphill, back toward shelter, back toward the tent they had fled less than an hour before. Igor Dyatlov himself was among them, found lying on his back, one arm bent as if shielding his face, snow packed into his open eyes. Whatever drove 9 people out of their tent and down a mountainside also, at some point, made at least some of them turn around and try to return. They didn't make it. It would take searchers almost 2 more months to find the remaining 4. Buried under nearly 4 meters of snow, in a ravine further into the forest, along the course of a small frozen stream. The final 4 members of the group were found on the 4th of May, when the spring thaw finally exposed enough of the terrain to search it properly. And it was here, in this ravine, that the case stopped being merely tragic and became something investigators still struggle to explain. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov both had massive chest fractures, injuries so severe that Boris Vozrozdeny, the forensic pathologist who examined them, compared the force required to the impact of a car crash. And yet, in both cases, there was no external bruising, no torn skin, nothing on the surface of their bodies to suggest what had crushed them from within. Nicholas Thibault-Brignoles had suffered a major skull fracture, and Lyudmila Dubinina, 20 years old, the youngest woman in the group, was found missing her tongue, her eyes, part of her lips, and portions of the tissue of her face. Some of these final 4 were also found wearing clothing that clearly hadn't belonged to them, clothing later identified as belonging to Doroshenko and Krivonischenko. The first 2 found dead beneath the cedar. Whoever was still alive after that first hour on the mountain had apparently stripped garment from their already dead companions in a final, freezing act of desperation to survive just a little longer. And then there was the radiation. When investigators tested clothing recovered from several of the bodies, certain garments returned radioactivity readings well above the expected background level. No one has ever fully explained why. The Soviet investigation, led by prosecutor Lev Ivanov, ran for months, interviewed dozens of witnesses, and considered, and ultimately dismissed, nearly every explanation investigators could think of. It wasn't an attack by the local Monsey people. There was no evidence of any struggle with an outside party, and the Monsey themselves were cleared early in the inquiry. It wasn't a fight among the hikers. Nothing in the diaries or their relationships suggested any conflict. In May of 1959, the case was formally closed. The official cause of death, written into the state record in Ivanov's own words, was that the hikers had perished as the result of, quote, a compelling unknown force. The files were sealed. The pass where they died was renamed by the people who searched for them Dyatlov Pass, after their young leader. And for decades, that was where the official story ended. It has never stayed closed for long in the decades since. The most credible modern explanation comes from a pair of scientists, Johann Gaum and Alexander Puzarin, who in 2021 modeled the exact snow conditions, slope angle, and the cut the hikers had made into the hillside to level their tent, and found a plausible mechanism for a delayed slab avalanche. A small, localized slide, hours after the tent was pitched, powerful enough to cause crushing injuries without leaving the dramatic debris field of a conventional avalanche, and terrifying enough in pitch darkness to send 9 people fleeing without their boots. It is, by most scientific accounts today, the leading theory. In 2020, Russian authorities officially reopened and closed the case a second time, also concluding an avalanche was the most likely cause. And yet the avalanche theory doesn't fully satisfy everyone who has studied this case closely. It struggles to fully explain the extreme height of the stripped cedar branches, the specific and unusual severity of some of the injuries, or the elevated radiation readings on the clothing. Other researchers have proposed infrasound, inaudible, low-frequency sound generated by wind moving across the shape of the mountain, capable of inducing panic, nausea, and irrational fear in people exposed to it, without their ever consciously hearing a sound at all. Others still point toward the era itself. 1959, deep in the Cold War, in a region not far from Soviet military testing grounds, and ask whether the group simply witnessed something they were never meant to see. No version of the story answers every question. That may be the truest thing that can be said about the Dyatlov Pass incident 66 years later. Today, the pass remains remote and difficult to reach, and still draws a small, steady stream of hikers, researchers, and the simply curious, each winter, retracing at least part of the group's original route. A modest memorial stands near the site, along with markers in the cemetery in Ekaterinburg, where most of the 9 are buried together, their gravestones arranged in a row, facing the same direction. Yuri Yudin, the 10th member, the one whose old injury saved his life, visited their graves every year until his own death in 2013. The last living witness to who they had been before the mountain took the rest of them. Whatever happened on that slope on the 1st of February, 1959, happened to 9 ordinary young people who knew the cold and were not careless and were not afraid of the dark in any way that should have gotten them killed. Something on that mountain made them run anyway. We have theories now. We have science now. We do not, even now, have certainty. And on quiet winter nights, in the archives where their case file is still kept, that unfinished sentence, a compelling unknown force, is still, technically, the last official word on what happened to them.